Francine makes landfall.
Okay, so it is official at the moment that Francine has, the center of Francine has moved ashore in South Louisiana. Do we have a specific location?
30 miles south-southwest of Morgan City.
Okay, so 30 miles
in
south.
Terrebonne Parish.
Terrebonne Parish. So right now we are looking at 54 mile per hour wind gusts in Morgan City. And obviously, as we take a look at that shot right there, you can see why. At the last hour, we had reports of winds gusting upwards of 62 miles per hour. So obviously, we're dealing with tropical storm force winds, hurricane force gusts at times. And as we take a look, not only in Morgan City, but look at the dark skies. As we take a look at the Queen City of the Tesh camera, looking down in that area, it's incredibly ominous as we speak at the moment. So, you know, again, the weather is going to be very, very active across St. Mary Parish here for the next several hours. Conditions very, very bad. I mean, it's just, you know, stay indoors, hunker down if you are in St. Mary Parish. Pretty close to Iberia Parish as well. So, you know, we're watching this storm, and Category 2 hurricane finally moves ashore in Terrebonne Parish, about 30 miles to the southwest of Morgan City? Southwest of Morgan City. So, you know, if they give us an exact location in terms of a locale or whatnot, we'll relay that information. But in the meantime, let's send things back to the desk.
All right, Dan, I'll take it. Our live coverage right here on News 15 of Hurricane Francine now hitting the 12-hour mark. Good evening, everyone. I'm Jim Hummel.
And I'm Marcel Fana. You just heard Dan mention we have landfall as of 4:58, 30 miles south-southwest of Morgan City in Terrebonne Parish. Hurricane Francine, a Category 2 storm.
And you're looking live right there on the side of your screen from one of our crews there stationed in Morgan City. You can see some debris actually flying by the camera right there. We were just watching Dracar Francois and his photographer Alex Folks delivering some live coverage. And just to watch those winds, how dire it's become just within the past few minutes.
Yeah, we've been watching throughout the day, of course, and you see, you know, our crews out in the field, and there they are in the midst of it, in the thick of it all, bringing us minute-by-minute updates as we have been doing for you all day throughout the day today. Whether you're watching us over the air on our app or listening to us with our 7 sister stations at Delta Radio, we appreciate you staying with us, and we will continue to carry you through this day.
And again, our live coverage now hitting the 12-hour mark right here on News 15. The big headline, Hurricane Francine making landfall in southeast Louisiana, just southwest of Morgan City in Terrebonne Parish. We're looking live right there in Morgan City, just outside a hotel where our crews are stationed, getting to safety right now because the conditions are quite bad. You can see the trees
we've reached that point of the day. We heard Dracar say they were without power, so that is starting. We're starting to see more and more of that as this storm continues to move inland.
All right, let's check in now with Storm Track 15 Chief Meteorologist Doppler Dan Romano, tracking the latest with Francine and where it goes from here, Dan.
Yeah, I mean, we are seeing conditions really deteriorating in Morgan City as we speak. The storm itself, you know, just moving onshore across South Louisiana, making a beeline somewhere between Baton Rouge, potentially towards Lake Pontchartrain and New Orleans. But again, what a difference between the southern half of this hurricane and the northern half of this hurricane. You know, meteorologist Adam Olivier joked about the fact that this is a half-a-cane because there's hardly any rain on the southern side of this storm. All the activity up to the north and primarily to the west as well. But again, we saw quite a bit of strengthening occur just as the storm moved onshore, officially as a Category 2 storm. And, you know, again, we call this a tower, a cloud tower that erupted because of the frictional forces. Basically what happened, we had all these winds kind of interact with the landmass. They didn't have anywhere to go. They went up, and that really just enhanced the convection, the cloud building near the center of the storm. So, you know, although the clouds mainly associated with Francine have eroded almost all around the entire area, that hasn't been the case closer to the coastline near the center and the northern part of this system where that eye wall is. So again, you can kind of see how it is impacting areas of St. Mary Parish as well as lower St. Martin. And now we're starting to see the eye wall impacting just the fringe areas of Iberia Parish as well. So if you are in this yellow area, this is where the worst of the weather persists. Look at what we're dealing with outside in Morgan City at the moment. Tremendously difficult to just work your way around. And you'll notice here, if you look close enough, you're starting to see some of the shrubbery kind of fall apart. We're starting to see that vegetation getting ripped to shreds thanks to these winds. So, you know, it's not so much the conditions themselves that are hazardous being out and about. It's the fact that you're dealing with basically shrapnel, whether it's from limbs, whether it's from branches, even, you know, leaves getting smacked in the face with a leaf at 60 to 70 miles per hour. That ain't feeling any good. But it's not only that, but you're also dealing with debris, perhaps from structures, again, that are getting thrown around here. It could be very, very dangerous to be out and about, especially in Morgan City right now, and that's why that curfew continues across the region. And unfortunately, even though this hurricane is picking up some momentum and moving to the northeast at about 17 miles per hour, it's still, you can see how thick this eye wall has gotten. That means that we are going to be dealing with these conditions persisting perhaps maybe for another half an hour, 15 minutes or so. Now, just to the east of the western side of this eye wall, we're hoping that this kind of lifts up into Morgan City, provides that area a bit of some fresh air, more or less, to allow them to catch their breath. But again, zooming in, you can kind of see this is what we're dealing with at the moment. The eye wall itself is collapsing, at least on the southern side of it, but on the northern side, that's where the brunt of this system is, and just really hammering areas of what we're seeing right now. So let's send things out to Marcel Fontenot.
Just waving at you, Dan.
We have so many questions and so many things we want to talk to you about. Good to see you. We've been seeing you in and out, but not officially being able to say, let's do this, let's talk about what's going on with Francine.
Yeah, hats off to the whole crew who's been doing such a great job so far with our coverage as we are in the 12-hour mark. Dan, talk to me a little bit about Morgan City. We see those conditions right there. You always hear about that experience of being in the eye of a hurricane. Where do you expect the eye to go, and what do you expect Morgan City right there to look like in the next few minutes?
Okay, so we're going to try to zoom in here to that location. So when we look at the eye wall itself, so the winds are kind of moving into the east, perhaps a little bit more out of the northeast, with the eye wall moving over the area right now. But this entire system is lifting up to the north with a little, it's actually lifting up to the northeast with a slight jog to the north. So moving at about northeast. So basically what we're seeing is, even though the winds are whipping really, really hard from east to west right now, as this system lifts up, then we are going to see this part of the eye wall kind of work its way back towards Morgan City. So then, instead of winds whipping out of the east, we're going to see winds whipping out of the north as the western edge of the eye wall lifts up into Morgan City. So it might see a little bit of a break in the action if this part of the eye kind of moves over that area. It depends on whether we get more of a northerly track or if we get more of a northeasterly track. For Morgan City's sake, we want more of a northerly track, but if that's the case, then you're looking at this band of precipitation lifting due north, and it's going to get really dangerously close to Lafayette. Nonetheless, we are looking at this kind of lifting up to the north and to the east. Perhaps, in my opinion, the western edge of that eye wall approaching Breaux Bridge, Henderson, and so forth.
So with that western edge approaching, Dan, is there an increased tornado risk that comes along with it? What does that look like as those winds start to move?
So we're still dealing with a tornado watch across parts of the area, but frankly, the tornado threat won't necessarily be on the western edge. That tornado threat is going to be on the eastern side, because that's where we're seeing a vast difference in the friction compared to the water, or I should say the vast difference in the friction of the water compared to the land. So it's almost, I used this analogy before, it's like spinning a top and that top going from a smooth tabletop surface to a carpet. So it interacts it, and that becomes a lot more jagged, and you tend to see a little bit more rotation with some of those thunderstorms.
So they could really be in for a double hit right there in Morgan City, depending on what happens over the next few minutes.
Well, that said, we typically don't see too many tornadic thunderstorms develop within the eye wall. Actually, what we see is a lot of tornadic weather develop either on the outer bands or even some of the inner bands on the fringe of what we call the central dense overcast. Basically, if you look at a hurricane and sometimes it has that sol feature, sometimes we could see tornadic weather developing there. So I don't really anticipate too much tornadic weather, at least with the eye wall itself. It's more or less on the outer bands. And with this system continuing to lift up, the threat for tornadic weather, especially on the western side of the storm, is almost going to be non-existent.
So with using your top analogy, as the storm starts to hit the carpet, as you mentioned, we know that once they move inland, they start to weaken. How much longer before we start to see some weakening even along the eye wall as well?
Well, we had a quick uptick
Yes.
in intensity as the storm moved onshore, but I do think that this system is going to deteriorate rather quickly.
Okay.
And I do think within the next, I'd say 12 hours or so, this is actually going to become a tropical storm.
Okay.
So that's how quickly this storm will weaken. I think more importantly, the fact that this storm is going to accelerate. Right now it's moving at about 17 miles per hour. I would say anywhere between 6 to 12 hours from now, we'll see this system moving anywhere between 20 to 23 miles per hour. Because again, there's not a lot of activity on the western side of this storm. I'm going to back this up a bit just to kind of show you. So again, once we see this storm system lift up pretty quickly up to the north, we're going to not only going to get rid of this eye wall, but conditions are going to improve dramatically because of the fact that, one, this system is actually pretty small in nature, but the eye itself is
It's large.
gigantic. Yes.
And that half cane dynamic too that you guys were talking about too. I hadn't heard that before.
Well, you know what, and that's the thing. We don't have to worry about the tumultuous conditions on the southern side of this storm like we do on the northern side of the storm.
We were talking earlier that if you have to have a hurricane, you want it like this one, fast moving, not much
Right.
after the initial bands come through.